think I just got puree in my hair.
Hello beautiful baby angels and welcome to my channel. Today we will be making pumpkin spice chai tres leches cake, but vegan. I got the idea of doing a pumpkin spice chai tres leches cake while I was sitting on an airplane. I was just about to fall asleep and I thought, people like pumpkin spice chai lattes, so why not turn it into a dessert? So with that, let's get started.
So in a large bowl, you're going to sift in 2 cups of flour, 2 teaspoons of baking powder, 2 teaspoons of baking soda, 2 teaspoons of cinnamon, 1/4 of a teaspoon of salt, 1/4 teaspoon of nutmeg, 1/4 teaspoon of allspice, 1/4 teaspoon of ground ginger, 1 cup of sugar. And you're just gonna sift that all into this bowl. Just making sure that there aren't any clumps. And then you're going to set this aside. And in another bowl, you're going to add 3/4 of a cup of vegetable oil. In this case, I'm using olive oil, and 1 teaspoon of vanilla, 1 15-ounce can of 100% pure pumpkin puree, and 1 cup of unsweetened applesauce. I couldn't find the big containers, so I just bought a bunch of little ones. Just as long as you have 1 cup of unsweetened applesauce. Oh no. So it looks like for me it was about 2, and I want to say like 1/3 of these little mini cups. Once you have all of your ingredients in your bowl, you're just going to mix it around until everything is well incorporated. And either use a spatula, or if it's easier, you can use like a hand mixer. Now, obviously, because of the oil, the pumpkin and the oil aren't gonna mix too well, but you just wanna incorporate it as well as you can. Now, once you're done, you want it to look somewhat like this. So now you're gonna bring back your dry ingredients, and you are slowly 1/4 of a cup at a time going to put the wet ingredients into the dry ingredients, and using a hand mixer, mix everything. Put it in with the dry. Now, I probably should have said this at the beginning, but you want your oven to be preheated at 350 degrees. If you haven't done that, go ahead and do that right now. So now that this is done, you're going to pour this into a greased, what is this, pan? This is a 9x13. You're pouring it in, you want to create a nice, smooth, even layer. On your cake, just poke it right in the middle. You can use a toothpick or a fork. If it comes out clean, you're good. Like that. and set it somewhere where it can cool down for about 15 minutes. So once you've let your cake cool down, you can start poking holes into it. You can either use chopsticks. In this case, I don't have any, so I'm gonna use a fork. I wanna poke holes all over it, no specific way or anything. You just want to create enough holes so that when you pour the milk mixture over it, it'll have enough space to be able to be soaked into the cake. Once you're done, it should look something somewhat like this. For our 3 milks, we will be using sweetened condensed milk. This is coconut sweetened condensed milk. We will be using some soy milk and some coconut milk. If you don't want to use soy milk, you can use almond milk. You can also use oat milk. I just prefer soy milk because it makes it a little bit thicker, which is a good replacement for just regular milk. This sweetened condensed coconut milk is homemade. I couldn't find any at my store, so I decided to just make my own. But if you are lucky enough to find any coconut sweetened condensed milk, feel free to use that instead. And the recipe for this homemade sweetened condensed milk is on my Instagram page, which I will link in the description below. I have about 4 ounces of sweetened condensed coconut milk. We will also be using 1 13-ounce can of full-fat coconut milk. If you find that your coconut milk has separated like this and it's separated the liquid from the fatty white coconut that has gone to the top, totally fine, and just throw it in there and mix it all up real good. If you don't want to use coconut milk, you can use non-dairy evaporated milk. I just find that they're really expensive and kind of hard to find, so I just use coconut milk instead because it's easier and a lot cheaper. And for the final milk, we will be using 3/4 of a cup of your choice of almond milk, soy milk, or oat milk, any kind of milk that you have available. 3/4 of a cup. And you want to mix this super well. This is going to be the mixture that we are going to use to soak our cake in. So you just want to make sure that there aren't any like coconut lumps and everything's just well mixed together. Once you're done mixing everything, it should be very, very smooth. And this is where you can do a taste test to see if it needs more sugar. If it's too thick, you can add some milk. For me personally, I think it could use a little bit more sugar and some more milk to kind of thin it out a little bit. I do want it to be thin enough that it can actually be soaked up by the cake and not just sit at the bottom without really getting mixed all together. So it ended up still being too thick for my liking, even after adding the soy milk. So we will be adding some water to thin it out even more. We got it to a nice kind of more runny consistency, super watery. I'm going to slowly pour this milk mixture on top. And I say slowly because you wanna let the milk have enough time to seep through the cake and really just let the cake absorb the milk. Just a little bit of patience. You just put in a little bit at a time, let it soak, and then put in a little bit more. So once it has been seeped through a little bit, you can go ahead and go in with the second layer. Again, doing the same thing where you just put in a little bit at a time and then wait for it to seep in. It should look something like this once it's done and you've used up all of your milk mixture. You can see it on the sides as well that the milk has gone through the cake and it's just being soaked up right now. So you want to let this chill in your fridge for about 4 hours, preferably overnight if you can, to just really let that cake soak in all of that flavor. You'll also want to put another can of full-fat coconut milk in the fridge as well so that coconut milk solids can rise to the top. That top fatty part is what we are going to be using for our whipped cream tomorrow. It is now the second day. Our cake has been chilling in the fridge overnight. So it should look something like this. The top came off because the aluminum foil was touching it. It's not a big deal because we're going to be covering it up with whipped cream anyway, so nobody's actually going to see this. But as you can see, most of the milk got soaked up by the cake overnight. If you still have like a little bit of like a layer of milk on top, that's totally fine. It's just gonna make it a little bit more moist, which is what we want anyway. So we are now ready to make our whipped cream. This can of full fat coconut milk has been chilling in the fridge overnight. It should look something like this. That is what we want. You're just gonna take that, scoop it, put it in your bowl. So now that we have our coconut milk separated from the liquidy stuff, we're going to be adding some powdered sugar. We're going to be adding about 5 tablespoons of powdered sugar, and we will be adding them 1 tablespoon at a time, all while hand mixing it because we want it to get nice and fluffy, and the cornstarch from the powdered sugar is gonna give it a nice light airy texture. If you don't want to do a chai whipped cream on top, you can just do the 5 tablespoons of powdered sugar along with 2 teaspoons of vanilla, and that should pair very well with the pumpkin spice, and that way you only have a pumpkin spice tres leches. And if you notice that your whipped cream is a little bit runnier than you want it to be, just stick it in the freezer for a few minutes. Sometimes if you over mix it, the heat from the mixer causes it to kind of start melting a little bit. Once you're done mixing it all up, we're going to be adding some chai spice mix. You can either buy it at the store. I didn't want to go to the store, so I actually made this, and I will have a recipe for the chai spice mix in the description below. So you're either going to take your homemade chai spice mix or your home-bought one, whichever one you prefer. I'm actually going to be adding it in increments of 1/4 of a teaspoon until I reach a flavor that I like. So here's our chai. It actually did end up coming out a little bit runnier than I would have liked, so I'm actually going to set this in the freezer just for a couple of minutes before adding it to the cake. I just don't want it to mix with that milk. So I want it to be a little bit thicker. Once it's done, then we'll go ahead and top the cake with this, and it should be ready to serve. So I did have to put my whipped cream in the freezer for just a few minutes just to get it solidified. And by the way, I do apologize for my Halloween costume. I had to make this video in different days just because I keep running out of time, but I promise the longer you let the cake sit in the fridge, I mean, it's only been sitting there for 1 day, but the longer you let it sit, the better, because then all the flavors can really have some time to like mix together. Anyway, so here's my whipped cream. It is super light, super fluffy, and also the chai mix that I put in there really comes out. So that's also another warning. Maybe just put in a little bit if you don't want it to taste too much like chai, because as you let it sit in the freezer or in the fridge, that chai flavor is going to come out a little bit more. I did get this pumpkin pie spice. So I'm just gonna sprinkle a little bit on top. You don't have to. I just think it'll look cute and pretty. And if you're not gonna serve it up right away, I do recommend that you let it chill in the fridge until you are about to serve it up, just because it doesn't taste very good when it's warm. It tastes much better when it's nice and cold, and that's actually how you're supposed to be eating it, is cold. So if you're not gonna eat it right away, just let it chill in the fridge until right before you're about to serve it up.